So you're looking for a cool looking retro scrambler in 2024, but you're not quite sure which one you should choose. Well, in this video we'll go through our 12 picks of the best bikes in the market, in price order ascending, and along the way I'll tell you which bike is right for which kind of rider. Now for starters, we've got Royal Enfield's Scram 411, which is a restyle version of their super popular Himalayan adventure bike. This one is slightly lower slung and it's got a little less wind protection, but fundamentally you've got the same single cylinder air-cooled engine, a similar stance, and a lot of the same componentry. Now, having tried this bike out at the launch in the UK last year, I will say it's not the quickest given that the peak power comes in at 24 horses, and yet it tips the scales at 185 kilograms. So look, if you twist the throttle, don't expect face-melting levels of acceleration, but ultimately this bike is built down to a price, and it does chug on quite nicely at lower speeds. Plus, the slightly smaller 19-inch front wheel does handle a little more willingly than the big 21 on the Himalayan equivalent. From a styling perspective, you get a great choice of colors, as well as the option to pay a little more for some bolder graphics, and so this one makes for a good budget choice that looks the business, providing you're not expecting to go particularly quickly. Another £750 though, and you can get one of the most hotly anticipated new bikes for 2024 in the form of Triumph's Scrambler 400X. Now this is a brand new single-cylinder 400 platform for them, with the option of either the Speed 400 Roadster or this slightly taller and slightly more rugged-looking Scrambler interpretation. Now our press bike is arriving in a couple of weeks, and so I'll have to reserve full judgment until I've had the chance to take it for a spin, but I'm expecting a bike that feels quite a bit more peppy than the Enfield, for example, with 40 horsepower peak and 6 kilograms less weight. On top of that, you've got what looks like better equipment with an upside-down fork and a radial 4-pot front brake from Bybre, and it's all wrapped up in a very nicely styled package with a level of finish and detail that I was super impressed with when I saw it in the flesh. So very much looking forward to reviewing this one, and almost certainly one to consider if you like the Triumph brand and styling, but you don't want the size and expense of the 900 and 1200 equivalents. Also in a similar sort of ballpark, we've got the brand new 2024 update to the Husqvarna SWAT 401. Now I know this one is playing fast and loose with the definition of a retro bike, with quite modern shapes and design features, but I think overall it is the sort of bike that will appeal to the retro enthusiast. Underneath, you've got a lot of the same underpinnings as KTM's 390 platform, with a single-cylinder engine that makes 44 horsepower peak and a lightweight chassis that comes in at just 172 kilograms. This one sits a little lower than the Triumph though, with an 820mm seat height, so that's 15mm lower, and so generally I'd consider this to be entirely a road-focused bike, whereas the Triumph might be able to take on some light trail and gravel work. Again, we've got one of these coming soon, so of course we'll bring you a full ride and report, but generally I'd say this is a great shout for anybody who likes that more modern edge. And also there are some neat updates for 2024, like the new TFT display. Also in a similar sort of area, you've got to consider the Honda CL500, which was launched last year and puts a decent case forward for itself. Now it's based upon their parallel twin 500 platform that you'll also find in the CB500 Naked or the NX500 Baby Adventure bike, and so with 2 cylinders you can expect a little more smoothness than some of the other single-cylinder bikes at this end of the list. Peak power is similar to the Husky at 45 horses, and while we did do a little bit of easy gravel riding on the launch, again I'd say this is very much a road-biased bike, especially considering the super low seat height of 790mm. From a styling perspective, it does seem to divide opinion a bit, with again that sort of part modern, part retro sort of design, but I think for anyone who likes the general aesthetic direction of Honda bikes, as well as the broadly favourable reputation of build quality, then this is a decent little budget scrambler to look at. If you do want something a lot more off-road capable though, then perhaps the best bike on the list would be this, the Fantic Cabero 500. You see, Fantic are primarily known for making enduro bikes and motocross bikes, and you can certainly feel it when you're riding this one. It effectively feels like a big dirt bike, just with the retro styling job wrapped around it. Now you can also get this bike in a 125 and a 250, as well as a big 700 parallel twin version, but for me, the 500 is the best balance of the bunch, with more grunt than the smaller bikes to make it more fun for road riding, but also retaining that dirt bike feel that makes this bike stand out from the crowd, whereas the 700 is derived from Yamaha's CP2 platform, and so ultimately, it's really a rugged-looking road bike. Thing is though, even in the 500 lineup, you've got a few options to choose from, starting with this Scrambler version, but also there's a rally model which sits a little bit taller, and so you've got a touch more off-road ability, but then on top of that, the deluxe edition, which gives you a slightly more fancy finish. Definitely want to demo if you want something that can actually do a bit of proper off-roading, and also, it has to be said, it's one of the best lookers on the list. Now, before we get onto the next bike, I'd just like to give a huge shout out to today's video sponsor, and that's Quadlock. You see, a lot of these retro-style bikes are pretty simple in the cockpit, and so if you want to add navigation or access to some of your phone's features, then in my opinion, the best way to do it is to use a quality phone mount like the ones you'll find in Quadlock's lineup. Personally, I've been using their Handlebar Mount Pro for some years now, which fits a wide variety of bikes that use a flat bar, but also there are lots of other options like the fork stem mount, the brake reservoir mount, the lever clamp mount, and the mirror mount that mean you should be able to find something to fit pretty much any motorcycle. You've also got a great selection of add-ons like the vibration dampener to keep your phone's camera safe from the potentially harmful vibes of the bike's engine, the wireless charging head to keep your phone juiced up without even having to plug it in, and also the 12-volt smart adapter, which draws power from the bike's battery straight to the charging head, but without ever draining it so that you can't start the bike. On top of that, they've got a whole ecosystem of products that mean you can use your case for cycling, at the desk, in your car, and many more activities, and so I thoroughly recommend checking out the link down in the description below to find out more, and also down there you'll find a discount code specifically for our viewers. So once again, a massive thanks to Quadlock for their support, and with that, back to the bikes. Now next up we've got Yamaha's Retro XSR 700, and specifically if you go for the Legacy edition that costs just under 9 grand, you'll get a few chunky extras like the high and wide handlebars, the rugged foot pegs, the flat track style MT60 tires, the bench seat, the fork gaiters, and the headlight guard that all add a little bit of that Scrambler vibe to what's already fundamentally a very enjoyable bike to ride. This is the CP2 parallel twin engine that I just mentioned in the Fantic 700, and at 72 horsepower peak, it's a big step up from the bikes we've looked at already on this list, but whilst also retaining a fairly modest wet weight of 190 kilograms, which does keep it very manageable. Again, like a lot of the other bikes on this list, this is really a road-focused machine, so don't be fooled by the rather tall 855mm seat height. But look, demo this one if you like the snappy throttle and snarling exhaust note of the MT-07, but just fancy something with that generally more palatable, old-school inspired styling. Next up, we've got Triumph's second entry in the list, with the parallel twin-powered Scrambler 900, which does a great job of emulating the visuals of Scramblers of yesteryear. For me, this is another contender for the best-looking bikes on the list, but you also get the peachy Bonneville engine that delivers loads of usable torque, and a nice low seat height at 790mm, which makes it feel very manageable for a wide range of riders, despite the considerable wet weight of 223 kilograms. New for 2024, there's a Stealth Edition, which is a slightly more premium special finish with a dark fade on the tank, and I was actually lucky enough to go to the factory and have a go at painting one of these tanks myself, of which I did an okay job, but it did give me an appreciation for the skill that goes into painting one that actually ends up on a bike in dealers. Overall, I'd say this is a nice balance between the smaller and bigger bikes on this list, with enough power and presence to make it feel like a proper big bike, but also not so much height, weight, and power and cost to make it feel over-intimidating. Definitely check it out if you like the Triumph fit and finish, and also something that biases slightly more towards old school than it does modern tech. For similar money though, you could also consider Ducati's Scrambler Icon with their brilliant 803cc L-twin that still has plenty of old school character and soul, owing to its air-cool vibes. It did get a fairly significant update for 2023 with new styling and a new TFT display, and also some revisions to the chassis, but ultimately, you can still see there are some design details that reference the original Ducati Scramblers and give it a bit of gravitas to the heritage. The base model is called the Icon, which is the most simple spec and comes in a range of colors, but also there's a full throttle version which is slightly more flat track inspired with a louder paint job, lower bars and a fancy exhaust. Then you can also get it in a night shift version, which is the most retro of the bunch, with spoke wheels and a tuck and roll style seat, along with that beautiful night shift paint job. Now all of these are again very much road biased, so really it's a question of which one you like the styling of, but also there is a slightly different bar position between each. I'd say these bikes are all a great shout if you want the Ducati name but on a budget, and it's also a more peppy alternative to the Triumph Scrambler with about 10 more horses in terms of peak power and also quite a bit less weight. Thing is though, Triumph do also offer their Scramblers in a 1200 variant, which is a big step up in power from 64 horses peak to 89. Previously they had an XC model which was the more road biased, and then on top of that the XE version which is taller and more off-road focused, but it seems like the general feeling in the market was that both were still pretty tall, and also a big jump up in price from the Scrambler 900. So new for 2024 they've revised the lineup, and while the premium top spec super tall XE model is still retained, the XC makes way for a new X model. This one sits a little bit lower at 820mm, but also gets slightly down-spec'd brakes and suspension, as well as a simpler display and switchgear, all of which help to bring the price down by a few £100 to £11,895. Personally, I think it's great news for the customer because it gives you the option to get all of the power of the 1200 engine, but without having to grow some longer legs. Plus, you've still got the option of the XE if you want something that's basically as capable as a big adventure bike, but with some beautiful retro styling. Now also at this larger capacity end of the spectrum, we've got the BMW R9T Scrambler with their signature Boxer twin that makes just shy of 110 horsepower. The Boxer twin definitely has its own distinct feel and character, and so I think you'll either love it or loathe it, but what's always impressed me about the R9Ts is that they're actually surprisingly quick with plenty of mid-range and pull on top of that impressive peak power, at least for this retro part of the market. Again, another road-biased bike here that sits fairly low, and it doesn't have particularly long travel suspension, but in terms of the Scrambler style, it does get a high-mounted exhaust, some high and wide handlebars, and also the option of some spoke wheels in the accessories catalogue for at least the impression of a bit more off-road capability. Now for the same money you can also get the Urban GS version, which has some great paint options, as well as some extra touches like the high front mudguard and headlight nacelle, although I should add that both these models are currently listed as 2023 bikes on the BMW website, with no equivalent in the 2024 lineup after the R9T had a fairly significant update. So if you're a fan of the Boxer and like the idea of a bike that's fairly quick on the road, then you might want to snap one of these up pretty quick, as it doesn't sound like they're going to be in dealers for that much longer. Now it is a big jump up in price to the next one at just under 15 grand, but the Indian FTR Rally absolutely delivers on thrills in spades, as well as a distinctive styling package. This is their big 1200 liquid-cooled 60-degree V-twin with 120 horsepower peak and 120 newton-meters of peak torque, but I think its liveliness goes beyond the spec sheet with a very snappy throttle response that makes this bike extremely entertaining. Styling-wise, the FTR lineup inherited a lot of its looks from their flat-track race bikes, but this particular rally model takes that formula and turns it into a bit of a Scrambler vibe with the spoke wheels, slightly longer suspension, and more muted paint schemes. There was a neat update for the last model year with a new TFT display that packs an impressive bunch of features, yet into a still retro-looking round form factor, and so I'd say it almost matches the Triumph 1200 in terms of features and spec, but just offers something a little less refined and slightly more unhinged, which might be to some riders' preference. Topping my list though, with no prices as it's not available yet, is the potential for a new Royal Enfield 650 Scrambler, which I think would be an absolute winner in this market. We've seen it spied out testing, and so it should be on the way soon, and effectively It'll take their 650 platform with a similar looking package to the Interceptor, but just jack it up a little and give it that more rugged look that we're used to on this genre of bike. Now with that brilliant air-cooled 650 twin, combined with Enfield's generally quite classic looking design style, I think this one could be the most authentic feeling retro scrambler on the market, and so I'm hoping it's every bit as good as it looks when they make the full announcement. In the meantime, we've made a full rundown of the spy shots and all the specs and features that we can see so far, so I'll leave that on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't already. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next video.